The Silent Girl. The sun rose over the village of Amani, its golden rays stretching across the vast African savanna. The people of Amani were awake early, as usual, tending to their chores. Laughter echoed from the children playing by the river, their joy a brief escape from the harshness of life in the dry season. Yet one child stood apart, quiet and watchful, Amara. Amara was not like the others. She never cried. Not as a baby, not when she scraped her knees, and not even when her father passed away a few years ago. While other children wailed at the smallest hurt, Amara's face remained stoic, her large, expressive eyes reflecting emotions that never spilled out. The villagers initially thought this was a blessing. "She's strong," they said, marveling at her composure. But as time passed, their admiration turned to unease. Whispers in the village. It began when the rain stopped. For months, the skies remained clear, leaving the fields cracked and lifeless. The river that once overflowed with fish now barely trickled. The crops withered, and the livestock grew weak. Misfortune struck one family after another, and the air in Amani grew heavy with despair. "She's cursed," whispered the baker's wife one morning, her voice low but sharp. "How can a child grow up without a single tear? It isn't natural." "I heard her father died protecting her," added another. "Not a single cry from her at his funeral." "What kind of child doesn't cry for their own father?" The whisper spread like wildfire, from the market stalls to the elders' council. Everywhere Amara went, she felt their eyes on her, filled with suspicion. The children she once played with now avoided her, and their parents warned them to stay away. Amara didn't understand why. She wasn't cursed, was she? She felt sadness, pain, and loss, but her tears simply never came. She had tried once, staring at herself in the water's reflection, willing her tears to fall, but her eyes remained dry. "Why can't I cry, Mama?" she asked her mother one evening, her voice small and trembling. They were sitting outside their modest hut, watching the stars. Her mother, a gentle woman with kind, weathered hands, brushed Amara's hair back and smiled softly. "My child, you are not cursed," she said. "You are special. I don't know why you don't cry, but I know it's not a bad thing. Sometimes, the heart hides what it is not ready to show." The elders demand. Despite her mother's reassurances, the villagers grew more restless. When another family's crops failed, fingers pointed once more to Amara. "She brings bad luck," they said. The drought started the year she stopped playing with the other children. That cannot be a coincidence. Finally, the elders called for a meeting. In the heart of the village, under the massive baobab tree, the entire community gathered. Amara stood before them, her head held high, though her heart raced with fear. The eldest of the council, a man with a long white beard and a walking stick carved with symbols of the ancestors, addressed her. "Amara, child of Amani," he began, his voice deep and steady. "We have watched you grow, and we have seen your silence. While others cry in joy and sorrow, you remain unmoved. This is not natural." "I feel sadness," Amara interrupted, her voice shaking. I don't cry." The elder raised a hand to silence her. "It does not matter what you feel. What matters is that your silence has brought unease to the village. Some believe you are the reason for our misfortunes. To protect Amani, we cannot ignore this any longer." Amara's chest tightened as the elder continued. "You must leave the village and find the reason for your condition. Until you uncover the truth, you cannot return." The words hit her like a thunderclap. She looked around, hoping someone would defend her, but the villagers avoided her gaze. Even those who once pitied her now stayed silent. Amara felt her throat tighten, and for the first time, she thought she might cry, but still, no tears came. A mother's love. That night, Amara sat with her mother under the stars once more. She hugged her knees to her chest, her face buried in her arms. "Why me?" she whispered. "I never asked to be different." Her mother placed a hand on her shoulder, her touch warm and reassuring. "Amara, my sweet child," she said, her voice soft but firm. "Sometimes, life gives us challenges not because we are weak, but because we are strong enough to overcome them." Amara looked up at her mother, her eyes filled with a pain she couldn't express. "But what if I can't find the answer? What if I can't ever cry?" Her mother smiled, though her own eyes glistened with unshed tears. "You will find the answer, my child. It is out there, waiting for you. Follow your heart, and it will guide you." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small pendant on a leather string. "Take this. It belonged to your grandmother. It will remind you of where you come from, no matter how far you go." Amara took the pendant, its smooth surface cool against her palm. She hugged her mother tightly, breathing in the familiar scent of earth and herbs. "I don't want to leave you," she whispered. Her mother kissed her forehead. "Sometimes, we must leave the ones we love to find ourselves. But remember, my love for you will always be with you." The first steps. The next morning, Amara stood at the edge of the village, a small bag slung over her shoulder. The sun was just rising, casting a golden glow over the huts and fields she had always called home. A few villagers stood nearby, watching in silence. Some looked curious, others relieved. Only her mother came to bid her farewell. "You are stronger than you think, Amara," her mother said, her voice steady. "And one day, you will return to Amani, not as the girl who couldn't cry, but as the woman who found her truth." Amara nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. She turned and began to walk, each step carrying her farther from the life she had known. The dry wind tugged at her hair, and the pendant around her neck glinted in the sunlight. As the village faded into the distance, Amara whispered to herself, "I will find the answer. No matter how far I have to go." The journey begins. The sun blazed mercilessly overhead as Amara walked along a dusty path, her small bag slung over her shoulder. Her mother's talisman, a smooth pendant with intricate carvings, hung around her neck, resting against her chest. It felt like a piece of home, a reminder of the life she had left behind in Amani. With each step, the village grew more distant, and the vast savanna stretched endlessly before her. The dry wind carried the faint smell of earth and grass, but the land itself seemed lifeless, parched by the unyielding drought. Amara's feet kicked up little clouds of dust as she trudged onward, her thoughts as heavy as the heat around her. She tried not to think of the whispers and accusing stares from the villagers, but they lingered in her mind. Was she truly cursed? Was it her fault the rains had stopped? Amara shook her head. "No," she thought firmly. "I am not cursed. I will find the truth." The scorching plains. The plains stretched on, barren and silent. Occasionally, Amara would spot a lone tree, its branches twisted and bare, offering no shade. Her water bottle, made of clay, grew lighter as the hours passed, and her legs ached from walking. The land seemed to mirror the emptiness inside her. The dryness of the earth felt like her heart, cracked, silent, and void of emotion. She longed for relief, for a sign that she was on the right path, but the landscape offered no answers. By midday, Amara found herself at the edge of a dry riverbed. The cracked earth beneath her feet told the story of water that had long since vanished. She knelt, running her fingers over the dry grooves. "Even the rivers can dry up," she murmured to herself. "Maybe hearts can too." She stood and pressed on, her resolve hardening. She couldn't let the doubt consume her. Somewhere out there was the answer she sought, and she would not give up. Meeting the herbalist. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, painting the savanna in hues of orange and gold, Amara saw a small hut in the distance. Smoke curled from its chimney, and a faint smell of herbs and spices wafted through the air. Cautiously, she approached the hut and knocked on the wooden door. It creaked open to reveal an old woman with skin the color of mahogany and eyes that seemed to hold centuries of wisdom. Her hair was wrapped in a brightly patterned cloth, and she wore a necklace made of dried seeds and stones. The woman studied Amara for a moment before smiling. "You've walked far, child," she said, her voice warm yet firm. "Come inside. Rest your feet." Amara hesitated but stepped inside, grateful for the shade. The air inside the hut was fragrant with the scent of drying herbs hanging from the ceiling. The woman gestured for Amara to sit on a woven mat while she poured a cup of herbal tea. "What brings you here, young one?" the herbalist asked, handing Amara the cup. Amara hesitated, unsure how to explain. I'm looking for answers," she said finally. "I've never cried, not even as a baby. The people in my village think I'm cursed." The woman's eyes narrowed thoughtfully as she listened. "And what do you think?" she asked. Amara stared into the tea, watching the leaves swirl in the cup. "I don't know," she admitted. "I feel things, sadness, pain, even joy, but no tears ever come. I've tried, but," she trailed off. The herbalist leaned forward, her gaze piercing. "The heart locked in silence must echo before it weeps," she said cryptically. Amara frowned. "What does that mean?" The woman smiled mysteriously and reached for a rolled-up piece of parchment. She unrolled it to reveal a map. "This is the way to the Mountain of Whispers," she said, pointing to a marked spot. "Many have gone there seeking clarity, and some have found it. If you are brave enough, you may uncover the truth about your heart." Amara took the map, her fingers trembling slightly. "Thank you," she said softly. The herbalist nodded. "Remember, child, the journey is not just through the land but through yourself. The mountain will show you what you need to see, but only if you are willing to face it." The treacherous river. Amara left the herbalist's hut as the sky darkened, the stars beginning to twinkle above. She followed the map, her determination renewed. The Mountain of Whispers was far, but she would find it, no matter how long it took. After a day of walking, she came upon a wide river. Unlike the dry riverbed she had seen earlier, this one was flowing, but its waters were wild and treacherous. Sharp rocks jutted out of the current, and the rushing water roared like a beast. A rickety wooden bridge spanned the river, its planks old and rotting. Amara hesitated, her heart pounding. Crossing the bridge seemed dangerous, but there was no other way forward. She stepped closer, testing the first plank with her foot. It creaked ominously but held. "I can do this," she whispered to herself, gripping the rope railing tightly. Step by step, she made her way across the bridge. The wind whipped around her, and the rushing water below seemed to mock her fear. About halfway across, one of the planks snapped under her foot, and she gasped, clinging to the rope to keep from falling. Her heart raced as she steadied herself, her knuckles white as she gripped the railing. "Keep going," she told herself, her voice trembling. "You can do this." With slow, careful steps, Amara made it to the other side. As her feet touched solid ground, she collapsed to her knees, her body shaking with relief. She looked back at the bridge, now swaying in the wind, and felt a flicker of pride. "I did it," she whispered, her voice stronger this time. "I can do this." Finding inner strength. As she continued on her journey, Amara realized that crossing the river was more than just a physical challenge. It was a test of her courage, a reminder that she was stronger than she thought. The fear she had felt on the bridge mirrored the fear she carried inside, fear of failure, of rejection, of never finding the answers she sought. But she had faced that fear and overcome it. For the first time, she felt a small spark of hope, a belief that maybe, just maybe, she could unlock the secrets of her heart. The mountain of whispers was still far away, but Amora's steps grew lighter as she walked. The pendant around her neck felt warmer now, as if her mother's love and faith in her were guiding her forward. "I will find the truth," she said aloud, her voice steady and filled with determination. "No matter what it takes." The forest of shadows. Amara stood at the edge of the forest, its towering trees forming a dense canopy that blocked out the sunlight. The air was cool and heavy, carrying a faint scent of moss and damp earth. She stared into the shadows, feeling a shiver run down her spine. The map from the herbalist had clearly marked this forest as the path to the mountain of whispers, but it also warned of the dangers within. Gathering her courage, she took a deep breath and stepped into the darkness. The moment she entered, the forest seemed to come alive. The rustling of leaves sounded like whispers, and the shadows shifted as though they were watching her. Every step Amara took was careful and deliberate, her senses heightened by the eerie silence. Eerie whispers and the talking owl. The deeper Amara ventured, the darker it became. She heard whispers all around her, soft, unintelligible murmurs that seemed to come from the trees themselves. At first, she thought it was the wind, but the whispers grew clearer, almost like voices. "Why doesn't she cry?" one voice murmured. "She hides something," another said. Amara spun around, her heart pounding. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice echoing through the forest. A sudden flutter of wings startled her, and a large owl landed on a low branch in front of her. Its feathers were dark and speckled, blending perfectly with the shadows, but its eyes glowed a piercing gold. The owl tilted its head, studying her with an almost human intelligence. "You're brave to enter the forest of shadows, young one," the owl said, its voice deep and soothing. Amara blinked in surprise. You can talk." "Of course," the owl replied with a hint of amusement. "This is no ordinary forest. And you, it seems, are no ordinary girl." Amara hesitated, unsure how to respond. "I'm looking for answers," she said finally. "I want to know why I can't cry." The owl's golden eyes seemed to pierce into her soul. "Tears are the soul's way of releasing what is buried deep," it said. "If you cannot cry, it means your soul is locked away, holding something it is not ready to face." Amara frowned, her chest tightening. "But how do I unlock it?" she asked. The owl spread its wings and lifted off the branch, circling above her before landing again. "You must confront what lies within," it said. "This forest will test you, but it may also guide you. Be open to what you feel, and you may find your way." The injured creature. As Amara continued through the forest, the owl's words echoed in her mind. The whispers around her grew softer, but the eerie feeling lingered. The path twisted and turned, and she found herself in a small clearing where the ground was covered in soft moss. A faint, pitiful sound caught her attention. Following the noise, she discovered a small, injured creature lying on the ground. It was a fawn, its leg caught in a trap made of twisted vines. The fawn's wide, frightened eyes looked up at her as it struggled to free itself. Amara knelt beside the animal, her heart aching at the sight. "It's okay," she whispered, her voice gentle. "I'll help you." Carefully, she untangled the vines, wincing as she saw the deep cuts they had left on the fawn's leg. The creature whimpered but remained still, as though it trusted her. Once it was free, Amara tore a strip from her scarf and wrapped it around the wound. "There," she said softly. "You'll be okay now." As the fawn limped away into the forest, Amara sat back and placed a hand over her chest. She felt a strange ache, as if her heart were trying to break free of some invisible weight. Tears threatened to rise, but they didn't come. She clenched her fist, frustrated. "Why can't I cry?" she whispered. Above her, the owl appeared again, watching her from a high branch. "You're beginning to feel," it said. "That is the first step. Meeting coffee." As the day wore on, the forest grew darker, and Amara began to feel the weight of exhaustion. She pushed forward, determined to reach the other side, but every step felt heavier than the last. Suddenly, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned quickly, her hand instinctively reaching for a small stick she had picked up earlier. A boy about her age emerged from the shadows. He had dark, curly hair and wore a simple tunic and sandals. His face was streaked with dirt, and he carried a small bag slung over his shoulder. "Who are you?" Amara asked, her voice cautious. The boy raised his hands in a gesture of peace. "My name is Kofi," he said. "I mean no harm. I'm just passing through." Amara studied him for a moment before lowering the stick. "I'm Amara," she said. "Where are you going?" Kofi hesitated, his expression clouding. "The Mountain of Whispers," he admitted. I need to find something there." Amara's eyes widened. "You're going there too?" Kofi nodded, glancing away. "They say it's a place where you can face your deepest fears." "I need to fix something I've done." "What did you do?" Amara asked. Kofi hesitated before speaking. "There was a fire in my village," he said quietly. "It was my fault. I was playing with matches near the storage hut, and it caught fire. No one was hurt, but we lost all our grain for the season. My family forgave me, but I can't forgive myself." Amara felt a pang of sympathy. She understood what it was like to carry guilt, even if hers came from something she didn't fully understand. "I'm going to the mountain to find out why I can't cry," she said. "Maybe we could travel together." Kofi looked at her, surprised. "You'd want to travel with me? Even after what I told you?" Amara nodded. "We are both looking for answers. Maybe we can help each other." Kofi smiled faintly. "All right," he said. "But if you hear any strange whispers, don't blame me." Amara laughed softly, the sound surprising even herself. "Deal." A growing bond. As they walked through the forest together, Amara and Kofi shared stories about their lives. Kofi told her about his family and how he missed them, even though he was too ashamed to go back. Amara spoke about the drought in Amani and how the villagers believed she was cursed. "They are wrong," Kofi said firmly. "You're not cursed. You're just different." Amara smiled, grateful for his words. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel so alone. The forest no longer seemed as dark or as threatening with Kofi by her side. As night fell, they found a sheltered spot to rest. Kofi started a small fire, and the two of them sat together, the flames casting flickering shadows on the trees around them. Amara touched the pendant around her neck, thinking of her mother. "Do you think we'll find what we are looking for?" she asked. Kofi stared into the fire, his expression thoughtful. "I think," he said slowly, "that finding the answer won't be easy. But maybe the journey is part of it." Amara nodded, his words resonating with her. The journey was difficult, but with Kofi by her side, she felt a flicker of hope that they would both find the answers they sought. The Cave of Echoes. The towering mountain of whispers loomed before Amara and Kofi, its jagged peaks piercing the sky like ancient teeth. The path leading to its base was steep and uneven, littered with loose rocks and overgrown vines. Both of them stood silently, taking in the sight. The mountain seemed alive, exuding an energy that pressed down on them like an invisible weight. A strange hum, low and rhythmic, vibrated in the air, sending shivers through Amara's body. "This is it," Kofi said, his voice quiet but firm. Amara nodded, clutching the pendant around her neck. "The Cave of Echoes," she murmured. "Do you think we are ready?" Kofi glanced at her, his expression a mix of determination and fear. "I don't know. But we've come too far to turn back now." The entrance. The entrance to the cave was massive, a dark gaping maw carved into the mountainside. Jagged rocks framed the opening like teeth, and the air that flowed from within was cold and damp. A faint, eerie whisper emanated from the cave, like 100 voices murmuring just out of reach. As they stepped closer, the pendant around Amara's neck seemed to grow warmer, almost as if urging her forward. She exchanged a glance with Kofi, who nodded and tightened his grip on the small lantern he carried. With a deep breath, Amara stepped into the darkness, Kofi close behind. The whispers grew louder as they entered, swirling around them in a chaotic symphony. The lantern cast flickering shadows on the cave walls, revealing strange symbols etched into the stone. "What are those?" Kofi asked, pointing to the symbols. "I don't know," Amara replied. "But they look ancient." As they ventured deeper, the whispers began to form words, indistinct at first but growing clearer with each step. "Why are you here?" one voice asked. "What do you seek?" another demanded. Amara's heartbeat quickened. The voices weren't coming from any one direction, they seemed to be everywhere, surrounding her, pressing into her mind. Facing the fears. The narrow tunnel opened into a vast chamber, the walls shimmering faintly as if alive. In the center of the room was a pool of water so still it reflected their faces like a mirror. The whispers grew louder, echoing off the walls until they became a deafening roar. Suddenly, the air grew heavy, and the chamber seemed to shift. Amara blinked, and when her vision cleared, she was no longer in the cave. She was back in Amani, standing beneath the old baobab tree where she used to play as a child. Her younger brother, Kian, was there, laughing as he climbed the tree. His laughter rang out, pure and joyful, but it made her chest tighten with an ache she couldn't explain. "Kian, calm down," she heard herself say, her voice trembling. But Kian didn't listen. He climbed higher, reaching for a branch that looked too thin to hold his weight. Amara's heart raced as she watched him. "Kian, no," she shouted. The branch snapped, and everything seemed to slow. Kian fell, his small body crumpling as he hit the ground. Amara ran to him, screaming his name, but he didn't move. The scene blurred, and Amara found herself kneeling by his side, her hands shaking as she tried to wake him. "Kian, please," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Wake up." The whispers around her grew louder, cruel and relentless. "You could have saved him," they hissed. "Why didn't you do something?" "I tried," Amara cried, her voice echoing in the chamber. "I was just a child. I didn't know what to do." Her chest heaved, and for the first time, tears pricked at her eyes. She could feel the pain, the guilt, the overwhelming weight of loss, but still, the tears refused to fall. "Why can't I cry?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Kofi's trial. Amara's vision shifted, and she was back in the cave. Beside her, Kofi was frozen in place, his face pale and his hands clenched into fists. His eyes were wide with fear, staring at something only he could see. "Kofi!" Amara called, but he didn't respond. The whispers shifted, surrounding Kofi now. "You started the fire," they hissed. "You destroyed everything." "No," Kofi muttered, shaking his head. "It was an accident. I didn't mean to." "You ruined your family," the voices roared. "They will never forgive you." Kofi fell to his knees, covering his ears as if to block out the sound. "Stop it," he shouted. "I know I made a mistake, but I didn't mean to." Amara knelt beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Kofi, it's not your fault," she said softly. "You didn't mean for it to happen." Kofi looked at her, his eyes filled with tears. "But it was my fault," he whispered. "I can't take it back." Amara tightened her grip on his shoulder. "You can't change the past," she said. "But you can forgive yourself. That's the only way to move forward." The echoes challenge. The whispers shifted again, this time addressing both of them. You carry guilt like a heavy stone, they said. But guilt will not free you. You must face what you hide and let it go. The shimmering pool in the center of the chamber began to glow, its surface rippling with light. Look into the water, the voices commanded. See what lies within. Amara and Kofi hesitated but stepped forward together, kneeling by the pool. As they looked into the water, their reflections changed, showing images of their past. Amara saw herself as a child, sitting by Kian's grave, her face emotionless. The scene shifted to show her mother, crying alone while Amara stood silently beside her. The guilt and pain were written across her mother's face, but Amara had done nothing to comfort her. Kofi saw his family's storage hut engulfed in flames, the firelight reflecting in his tear-filled eyes. He saw his father's weary face as he tried to rebuild what was lost, and his mother's quiet disappointment. The echoes grew softer, their tone almost gentle. You cannot move forward until you release what binds you, they said. Let the tears fall. A glimmer of hope. Amara felt her chest tighten again, the ache overwhelming. She clenched her fist, willing the tears to come. The memory of Kian's fall replayed in her mind, and she finally allowed herself to feel the pain she had buried for so long. I miss you, Kian, she whispered, her voice breaking. I'm so sorry. A single tear welled in her eye, but it didn't fall. It lingered, heavy and stubborn, refusing to release her completely. Amara screamed in frustration, her voice echoing through the chamber. Why won't you let me cry? She demanded. The echoes answered softly, you are close, but you must dig deeper. There is more you must face. Beside her, Kofi wiped his tear-streaked face, his shoulders trembling. Thank you, Amara, he said quietly. You were right. I have to forgive myself. Amara nodded, her own emotions raw and exposed. The journey was far from over, but she could feel a change within her, a small crack in the wall she had built around her heart. For the first time, she felt that she might truly find the answers she sought. The mirror of truth. The chamber of echoes faded into darkness as Amara and Kofi climbed deeper into the mountain. The air grew cooler, and a faint glow illuminated the tunnel ahead. Their footsteps echoed softly as they walked, the silence between them heavy with reflection. Each step felt like a journey inward, forcing them to confront the truths they had avoided for so long. Do you think we're close? Kofi asked, his voice low. Amara glanced at the glowing light ahead. I think so, she said, clutching her mother's pendant. It felt warmer now, almost as if it were guiding her. Whatever we find, we have to be ready. Kofi nodded, his face resolute. Together, they pressed on. The shimmering pool. The tunnel opened into a vast cavern, its walls shimmering like polished glass. In the center of the cavern lay a pool of water, perfectly still and glowing with an ethereal light. The surface reflected the chamber like a flawless mirror, but as Amara and Kofi stepped closer, they noticed something strange. Their reflections were not their current selves. Amara saw a young girl staring back at her, wide-eyed and innocent. The girl wore a bright smile, her small hands clutching a toy carved from wood. Behind her stood a boy, her younger brother, Kian. His laughter echoed faintly, though his reflection didn't move. Kofi saw himself as a child, standing in front of his family's grain storage hut. Flames flickered in the reflection, casting long shadows across his face. His younger self looked terrified, frozen as the fire consumed everything behind him. What is this place? Kofi whispered, his voice trembling. Amara took a shaky breath. I think it's showing us who we were. What we've been hiding. Amara's past. As Amara stared into the pool, the reflection shifted, pulling her into a memory she had long buried. She was back in Amani, sitting beneath the baobab tree with Kian. He was laughing as he climbed its branches, his small hands gripping the bark with ease. "Kian, be careful," she heard herself say, her voice light but cautious. Kian grinned down at her, his smile wide and carefree. "I'm fine, Amara. Watch me." The memory played out as it always had. Kian climbed higher, reaching for a branch that was too thin to hold his weight. Amara felt her chest tighten as the branch snapped, and Kian fell. She screamed his name, running to his side, but no matter how many times she replayed the scene in her mind, she couldn't change it. Kian was gone, and she had been powerless to save him. The memory shifted, showing Amara at Kian's burial. Her mother wept openly, her cries raw with grief, but Amara stood silent. Her face was expressionless, her eyes dry. The villagers whispered around her, their words cutting like knives. "She doesn't even cry for her own brother," one said. "Maybe she doesn't feel anything," another added. Amara's chest heaved as she watched the scene unfold. She remembered feeling the weight of their words, the guilt pressing down on her like a boulder. She had believed them, convinced herself that her inability to cry meant she was broken. The truth revealed. The reflection shifted again, this time showing her mother sitting beside her one night. Her mother's face was still strict, but her voice was soft and steady. "Amara," her mother said gently, "you don't have to cry if you're not ready. But know this, it's not your fault. Kian's death wasn't your doing. You were just a child." The words struck Amara like a thunderclap. She remembered this moment, but at the time, she hadn't believed her mother. She had carried the guilt with her, letting it harden her heart and silence her tears. But now, standing before the mirror of truth, she saw it clearly for the first time. "It wasn't my fault," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I was just a child." The pool rippled, as if in response to her realization. Her reflection softened, showing her younger self smiling again, her eyes filled with light. The ache in her chest grew, and for the first time, a tear welled in her eye. Kofi's realization. Beside her, Kofi knelt by the pool, staring into his own reflection. The fire burned behind his younger self, but this time, he saw his parents running to put it out. They worked together, their faces determined, their love for him evident even amidst the chaos. "They didn't blame me," Kofi murmured, his voice heavy with emotion. "I blamed myself, but they never did." The pool showed him another memory, his mother hugging him tightly after the fire, her voice gentle. "Kofi, accidents happen," she said. "What matters is that you're safe. We'll rebuild, together." Kofi's shoulders shook as tears streamed down his face. "I've been holding on to this guilt for so long," he said. "I thought I didn't deserve their love. But they never stopped loving me." The first tear. Amara watched Kofi cry, his tears falling freely into the pool. She felt the ache in her own heart intensify, the weight of her guilt pressing harder against her. She thought of Kian, his laughter, and his love for her. He wouldn't want her to carry this pain forever. He wouldn't want her to lock her heart away. "I'm sorry, Kian," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I'm so sorry." A single tear slid down her cheek, falling into the pool with a soft ripple. The moment it touched the water, a wave of emotion washed over her, grief, love, guilt, and relief all at once. The dam she had built around her heart crumbled, and tears began to flow freely. Amara sobbed, her body trembling as years of pent-up pain and sorrow were finally released. The echoes in the cavern softened, their whispers becoming gentle and soothing. "Tears are not a weakness," they said. "They are a gift. A sign of healing. Freedom from guilt." As the tears subsided, Amara felt a profound sense of relief. The weight she had carried for so long was gone, replaced by a lightness she hadn't known was possible. She looked at Kofi, who smiled through his own tears. "You did it," he said. You let it out. Amara nodded, her heart full. I feel free, she said. For the first time, I feel like myself. The pool glowed brighter, its light filling the cavern. The whispers faded, leaving behind a peaceful silence. Amara and Kofi sat by the pool for a while, letting the calm wash over them. A new beginning. When they finally stood to leave, the cavern seemed different, less intimidating, more welcoming. Amara touched the pendant around her neck, feeling her mother's love and strength within it. We are not done yet, Kofi said as they made their way out of the cavern. But I think we are on the right path. Amara smiled, her tears drying on her cheeks. Yes, she said. We are finally moving forward. As they stepped out of the cave and into the sunlight, the world felt brighter, the air fresher. For the first time in her life, Amara felt truly alive. The return home. The descent from the mountain of whispers felt different than the journey up. The air seemed fresher, the sunlight warmer, and the whispers of the forest had faded into silence. Amara walked beside Kofi, her steps lighter than they had been in years. For the first time, her heart no longer felt burdened by guilt or self-doubt. Kofi glanced at her and smiled. You seem different, he said. I feel different, Amara replied, her voice steady. She touched her cheeks, where the traces of her tears had dried. It's like I finally let go of something I didn't even realize I was holding on to. Kofi nodded, his own expression thoughtful. I feel it too. Facing those memories, it wasn't easy, but I think it's what I needed. I'm not afraid to go back anymore. Amara smiled at him, grateful for his companionship. They had come to the mountain as strangers, but they were living as friends, bound by the trials they had endured together. A stranded traveler. As they made their way through the forest surrounding the mountain, they heard a faint cry for help. Amara and Kofi exchanged a glance before hurrying toward the sound. They found an elderly man sitting beneath a tree, clutching his ankle. His cart, filled with baskets of fruit and dried goods, lay overturned nearby. Are you hurt? Amara asked, kneeling beside him. The man winced. I twisted my ankle when the cart tipped over, he said. I was trying to deliver goods to the next village, but now I can't walk, and my cart is too heavy to move on my own. Kofi stepped forward, inspecting the cart. We'll help you, he said firmly. Amara and I can pull the cart, and we'll help you get to where you need to go. Amara nodded, already lifting one of the baskets back onto the cart. Together, they walked quickly, reloading the goods and securing them with rope. Once the cart was upright, they helped the man to his feet, supporting him as he hobbled alongside them. The journey was slow, but Amara and Kofi didn't mind. As they walked, the man told them stories about his travels, his voice warm with gratitude. It's rare to find such kind-hearted people these days, he said. The two of you are a blessing. Amara felt a swell of pride, not just for herself but for Kofi as well. Their experiences on the mountain had taught them the value of empathy, and they were stronger for it. Kofi's decision. By the time they reached the next village, the sun was beginning to set. The man's family came rushing out to greet him, their faces alight with relief. They offered Amara and Kofi food and water as thanks, and the two travelers rested by the fire. As they sat, Kofi turned to Amara, his expression serious. I've been thinking, he said. I want to go back to my village. Amara looked at him, surprised. Are you sure? He nodded. I've spent so long running from my mistakes, but the mountain showed me that my family never stopped loving me, even after what I did. I need to face them, to apologize and make things right. Amara smiled. That's brave, Kofi. I think they'll be proud of you. Kofi hesitated, then reached into his bag and pulled out the smooth stone he had carried since their time in the cave. You've helped me so much, Amara. I want you to have this. Amara shook her head, reaching for the pendant around her neck. Keep the stone, Kofi. I think you need it more than I will. She slipped the pendant off and handed it to him. Take this instead. It's my mother's talisman. It will remind you of our journey, and that you're never alone. Kofi stared at the pendant, his eyes wide. Amara, I can't take this. It's so important to you. It is, she said softly. But I want you to have it. You've been my friend when I needed one most. It's a symbol of everything we've been through together. Kofi accepted the pendant, his hands trembling slightly. Thank you, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I'll treasure it. They path home. The next morning, Amara and Kofi parted ways. Kofi set off toward his village, the pendant glinting in the sunlight as it hung around his neck. Amara watched him go, her heart filled with a bittersweet mix of sadness and pride. She turned and began her own journey home, her steps purposeful and steady. The landscape seemed brighter than before, the world alive with colors and sounds she hadn't noticed in years. Amara felt connected to herself in a way she never had before, her heart open and free. The memories of Kian still lingered, but they no longer weighed her down. Instead, they felt like a part of her, a reminder of the love she had shared with her brother. She whispered a quiet thank you to him as she walked, knowing he would always be with her. A new confidence. As Amara neared the outskirts of Amani, the village came into view. The familiar huts and fields stretched before her, but they no longer felt like a place of judgment and pain. This time, she was ready to face her past and share her story. Amara paused for a moment, taking a deep breath. I'm ready, she said aloud, her voice strong. With her heart lighter than ever, she stepped onto the path that would lead her back home. Acceptance and healing. The village of Amani was quiet as Amara approached. The drought had left its mark, fields lay barren, and the river was still reduced to a trickle. The once bustling marketplace now seemed subdued, with fewer voices and more tired faces. Amara paused at the edge of the village, her heart pounding. It had been weeks since she had left, but it felt like a lifetime. Taking a deep breath, she walked forward. The familiar sights and sounds brought a wave of emotion, but this time, she didn't try to suppress it. She felt stronger now, ready to face whatever awaited her. The villagers' reaction. As Amara stepped into the village square, heads turned. The villagers stopped their walk, their expressions shifting from surprise to confusion. Whispers rippled through the crowd. She's back, one woman said. But why? Did she find what she was looking for? Another asked. Amara stood tall, her heart steadied despite the murmurs. She noticed the village elders emerging from their huts, their faces serious but curious. The eldest elder, the man with the long white beard who had ordered her to leave, stepped forward. Amara, he said, his voice measured. You have returned. Does this mean you found the answers we sent you to seek? Amara nodded, her gaze unwavering. Yes, she said. I found the truth about myself. And I'm here to share it with all of you. Sharing her journey. The villagers gathered around her, forming a circle in the square. Amara took a deep breath, her voice steady as she began to speak. I left this village carrying guilt and doubt, unsure of who I was or why I couldn't cry, she said. I believed I was broken, cursed even, because of what others said. But my journey to the mountain of whispers showed me the truth. She described the forest, the talking owl, the cave of echoes, and the mirror of truth. She spoke of the memories she had confronted, her brother Kian's fall, the guilt she had carried, and the love she had buried deep within her heart. The villagers listened in silence, their faces reflecting a mixture of awe and shame. The mountain taught me that my inability to cry wasn't a curse, Amara continued. It was a wall I had built to protect myself from pain. But hiding from my emotions didn't make them disappear, it only made the burden heavier. She paused, her voice softening. Tears aren't a sign of weakness. They are a sign of healing, of letting go. And today, I want to show you that I found my strength. The tears of renewal. Amara closed her eyes, letting the memories wash over her, Kian's laughter, her mother's comforting words, the ache of her guilt, and the release she had felt in the cave. A tear rolled down her cheek, then another, and soon, she was crying openly in front of the entire village. Her tears fell like rain, soaking the dry earth beneath her feet. The villagers watched in stunned silence, their skepticism melting into awe. The sky above, once cloudless and unforgiving, began to darken with thick grey clouds. The rumble of thunder echoed in the distance. As Amara wiped her face, the first drops of rain began to fall. The villagers gasped, looking up at the sky as the gentle drizzle turned into a steady downpour. The earth drank in the water eagerly, and the air was filled with the scent of renewal. "It's a sign," someone whispered. "The drought is over," another said, their voice trembling with hope. "Welcome back with love." The eldest elder stepped forward, his stern face softened with emotion. "Amara," he said, his voice heavy with regret, "we were wrong to judge you. You have shown courage, resilience, and strength far beyond your years. You are not cursed, you are a blessing." The villagers erupted into applause, their faces alight with admiration and respect. Amara's mother pushed through the crowd, tears streaming down her face as she embraced her daughter tightly. "My sweet Amara," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "I'm so proud of you." Amara smiled, holding her mother close. For the first time, she felt truly at peace, surrounded by love and acceptance. A symbol of resilience. In the days that followed, the rain continued to bless the land, filling the river and reviving the crops. The villagers worked together to rebuild what had been lost, their spirits renewed by the hope Amara had brought back. Amara became a beacon of strength in Amani, her story inspiring others to face their own struggles. She helped the villagers confront their fears and find healing, just as she had. Children who once avoided her now flocked to her side, listening eagerly as she told them about her journey. "Tears don't make us weak," she would tell them. "They make us human. They help us grow. A flourishing future." One morning, Amara stood by the river, watching its waters flow freely once more. She thought of Kian, his memory now a source of comfort rather than pain. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice steady. "For everything." As she turned to leave, she saw Kofi walking toward her, the talisman she had given him glinting in the sunlight. He grinned, holding up a small bag of grain. "My family insisted I bring this as thanks," he said. "They wanted you to know they are doing well." Amara smiled, her heart full. "I'm glad," she said. "How are you feeling?" Kofi shrugged, his grin widening. "Lighter. Happier. It's amazing what a little forgiveness can do." They sat by the river, sharing stories and laughter. The bond they had formed on their journey remained strong, a testament to the power of friendship and courage. As the sun set over Amani, casting the village in a warm golden glow, Amara felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She had found her place, her strength, and her voice. The journey had been long and difficult, but it had led her to a life filled with hope and purpose.